Yeah, so we're live now and trying to figure out TikTok live at the same time. But I also I looks like now I'm large and you're smaller there on TikTok. But I've been using ChatGPT like crazy this week. I didn't realize we talked about this briefly last week or last video about how helpful ChatGPT is, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I like last night I had like an in-depth, deep conversation with ChatGPT about my YouTube page, like my value add to the space that I'm moving into, which is cinematography, cameras, and content creation. And it gives you a really thorough breakdown of your channel, of like your delivery, because I also, help write my scripts through there and stuff like that. So it has historical context about the things that I talk about. And so it's telling me last night, the way that I deliver information is a certain way and my, presence is calm and things like that. Like I'm not, as you know, I'm not the over energetic, like screamer into the camera or into the microphone type person on YouTube. And
Right.
the way I'm talking now is pretty much the way that I do my videos. And so I was surprised at like how in depth it got. It compared me to like Brandon Washington, Cam Mackey, Terry Warfield, Tight Shirt Terry, Potato Jet. Not as far as like the size of their channel, but the way that I deliver the information. And what surprised me,
Here we go.
which makes sense for me, is because I do always try to be like as detail oriented as possible, especially on tech dives.
Yeah.
It compared me to Gerald Undone, but not to his level, but more or less that I'm able to bridge the gap between like Gerald Undone's tech savviness, but making it okay for layman's terms, right? So the new user, which is what I've always tried to cater to. I've always tried to cater to that person that doesn't understand the tech, right? And so it's super interesting. So I know we're all set up now, and I just wanted to fill the air. But if anyone is wondering like how powerful ChatGPT is and like what is it used for, it is not just for creating pictures and thumbnails and different stuff like that. It has, especially the paid version, $20 a month. It has the ability to basically do a thorough analysis of anything that you want to talk about, whether that's business. I even replied to a court document this week that I had to go file for, my local taxes and stuff like that. I sat there and talked through the court system, what I needed to write, what was the answer, like what was the legal limitations and stuff like that. It's freaking crazy, man. Like the stuff you can talk about.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I used it to completely help me set up YouTube memberships, and it's totally overwhelmed. Never done that before. And this is what we were talking about a second ago. Like, at what point in our life is tech going to go beyond our ability to comprehend it? Because I think about like my grandparents and even parents, like when you start talking about like iPhone usage and stuff like that, they're like, oh, I don't know. It's like it's getting kind of beyond them. And part of me is like, bro, the iPhone's been around for 20 years. Like you were literally in your early 30s when it came out. So it's like you've had time to understand. That's your fault for not keeping up with it. But when is our lack of understanding going to catch? Because like tech is still just advancing so fast with AI. That's why I'm trying to stay on top of it. And so with AI, I use ChatGPT every day. It's completely replaced Google, but I don't use it like Google. Like I definitely ask it questions, but it has context, it has the ability to continue a conversation. And I used it for memberships because I was like, I want to start, going down the route of being a full-time creator in the future, and I want to start building that community now because my channel analytics, like I told ChatGPT, here's all of my analytics, and I did screenshots, and that's the difference with like the paid version is you can do unlimited screenshots. So I don't even have to type out what I need. I just put a screenshot of what I'm trying to talk about, and it'll just analyze that and just immediately like tell me everything that I need to know. And so I said, am I ready for memberships? And it said, you're 100% ready. Here's why. And then I used it to build out the memberships because I was like, one thing I'll never do is lock any of my content behind a paywall that's been free in the past.
Agreed.
So like, I don't want my channel to change. I just want to add to it. And so how can I do that? And it formulated this entire plan of how to make it never do that, but also like actually worth considering paying for. And so I have 3 different tiers that I'm about to launch this weekend. And shameless plug if you're interested in supporting being a part of the Freaky Tech fam. But like it built out an entire plan for me. And then like I have custom emojis and oh my god, what's the other thing that it's called? Like the little icon that goes next to their name whenever they leave a comment. So anyways, I have custom those and emojis that ChatGPT created, and I uploaded a bunch of pictures of my face making different expressions, and it made a channel color themed version of my face that's cartoonish that people can use as emojis in the chat. And it's like
that's hilarious.
like the image generation, everything it did is fantastic. And so I'm going to launch a full membership program, and we'll see what happens. I'm a little nervous, to be honest, because I'm like, I have a lot of imposter syndrome sometimes where it's like the channel's grown, but I don't feel like, am I actually worth it to people? I don't know.
Well, the interesting thing that I've thought about that, because I flirted with memberships, and I actually have them through the website that does my gear and stuff like that. The interesting thing about memberships is that we do have information and knowledge that the average person doesn't have.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you think about the amount of tech that we touch on a consistent basis, and then camera gear and, studio gear and, the editing process, the talking to brand process, like all of that stuff that people are trying to figure out along the way. I've made television reviews on the Hisense S7 canvas, but I've done like maybe 7 or 8 television reviews, and I've touched a lot of high-end and then budget versions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The average person might buy a television, and that television stays on their wall for 15 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when they make that purchase, it is a huge purchase. Like, especially now that these TVs and this tech is starting to cost crazy amounts, specifically with inflation and stuff like that, right? So you have context that they don't have. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And you can help somebody make that good decision versus that buyer's remorse decision in a heartbeat, just because they're listening to information that they don't have access to themselves.
That's exactly what I'm trying to lean into, is not the, like when I do the Switch 2, I did like in a first impressions video, and I'm going to do another video reviewing it, but it's not going to be, let's break down every spec and feature, because there's 100 of those videos. It's going to be like, Switch 2 has been out for a week or two now. Should you actually wait in line for this thing? What are your thoughts? And I definitely want to talk about the Switch 2, on this episode. But that's the kind of thought process I've been applying to it. And the same, I'm about to do the Sony versus Canon video, where it's not about comparing those two cameras, right? Like the cameras that Sony sent out in my R8s, vastly different. Well, not vastly different, but like there's too much of a difference for that to be a fair comparison. So it's really about the ecosystem. Like what is the user experience versus the actual battle between the technology. And I think that's because I'm not a super technical reviewer, and like for ChatGPT to tell you that you're closer to Gerald Undone, or you have like a balance of that, it definitely wouldn't tell me that. It would not tell me that. And I think part of it is just I'm overwhelmed with too many things to review, and so I don't deep dive things as well as I should. And so it's easier in a way to talk about, here's the thought process behind if you should buy it or not, versus let's go through the specs and what they mean. But to your point on ChatGPT offloading some of the work, I use it for my script writing, and it doesn't take away my authentic thoughts. But what I do is I tell it, on every single spec and feature of this product that I share with you, I want you to write one sentence that says, here's what that means, here's how that changes your experience. For instance, like variable refresh rate on the Switch 2. When I was doing that, I was like, put something in there that quickly explains what VRR is to my audience. That way I'm not just reading from a spec list, I'm actually providing knowledge. And that has really changed the game.
I agree. And two things. So I do want to talk about Sony versus Canon, right? Just a little bit on here, preview for whatever your video is going to be. We don't got to go deep dive, but I do want to get some of your takes on that. But I think you're, absolutely right on the viewpoint. And here's why, is because my favorite YouTubers, right, has always been Marcus Brownlee, right? It's always been, Peter McKinnon. It's always been Potato Jet. Matty Happoja, and that's kind of what got me into YouTube. I've always said that, right? But and Gerald O'Dunn, but they're all vastly different. They're all vastly different. The one thing that I absolutely love about Marquez is that he 100% knows every tech spec, but you can't tell in the way that he delivers it. He delivers it in such an an easy, palatable understanding of that product without boring you for the person that isn't interested in that with those tech specs. He puts it in real world use. This is how I use it. I use it for this. It's always 2 weeks. I had it for about 2 weeks and blah, 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 blah. And he just tells you how he used it while covering those tech specs. And Gerald Undone, if you don't like tech specs, well, it's like being in a finance class, sitting in the front row. If you're listening to him talk about cameras and, and depth, and 13 stops of dynamic range, and each stop is blah, 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 blah. Like that kills some people, right? But then Potato Jet is like, let's go take this thing out on a freaking mountain, ride a
Right.
bike, ride a
Let's test its
motorcycle,
limits.
right, and show you. Yeah, so
Dude, Gerald and
yeah.
Dunn could explain a camera to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT would be like, "Damn," he really could. But dude, your point on Marquez, I don't think you understand how rent free he lives in my head when it comes to creating content. Because sometimes I actually get kind of pissed off because I don't mean pissed off at him, but I'm so pissed that I can't make my stuff that casual because it's not my style. But because you're right, he dives in, like, there's nothing he leaves untouched in terms of tech specs, and he does it in a short amount of time while sounding casual. And I don't want to say dumb it down, but he explains it in a way that any like the entry point to understanding his videos is really, really low, but he's still catering to an audience that understands the higher end version of that tech, and I just don't understand how he does it. And obviously he has a team that helps him with the scripts. He's just good. He's been doing it for so long, but he's the gold standard to me in terms of how to approach the broader audience with explaining tech and features.
Agreed.
I hope to be that one day, and I just
agree. I mean, even like for an example, when he did the Tesla ceiling, Tesla roof panels, the solar panels, like that was a very detailed video on a very niche product that 95% of us in the country are never going to touch or even think about buying, right? But the way he designed that video was so entertaining. I watched it anyway. I'm like, damn, am I going to spend $300,000 on a damn roof, for Tesla panels, solar panels, and stuff like that. But I left the video like, damn, if I could afford it, I absolutely would, because I knew exactly what it did. I knew exactly how it saved him money over time and how it paid for itself over that 2-year period. And I am sitting in Georgia with direct sunlight with no foliage cover. So like that would definitely be beneficial for me. So I was like, damn, so you're 100% right. I love the way that and that's why I've always gravitated to him. But going back to you, I don't think, because me and you had that conversation, I don't think you have to touch every single tech spec. I really don't. I think, because whether or not you like a product or dislike a product is going to be based on two things. One, the facts, and two, your own personal experience with it and other products like it. So there's no way getting around that, right? And so the people that gravitate towards me, towards you, towards other content creators have something in common to where they trust what we say, because there's some form of similarity in the way that they approach things. And that's why when they hear our message, their message resonates. And so with that being said, I don't think I need to cover every single tech spec, because I'm a certain type of person, and the people that are similar to me or have similar interests are going to gravitate towards my content, just like I gravitate towards Gerald for certain things, and Potato Jet for certain things, and Maddie for certain things, etc. And that's why I stopped needing to hit every single tech spec. I always make sure that you can get the link in the description so you can go and see the full specs, and you can, here's further information. Here's maybe somebody else you should watch if you want a deeper dive or whatever the case may be. But I don't think for the average person, they need to understand that this television that's over there on the wall is 240 hertz versus 120 hertz versus blah, blah, blah. They just want to know, does the damn thing look good if I have it in a sunny room with the light shining on it? You know what I'm saying? And if I watch it from this angle, and if I got people sitting in the kitchen, are they going to be able to see it too? And blah, blah, blah. Like, those are the things that consumers focus on more. And I think we as tech reviewers, or reviewers in general, we sometimes spin our wheels on all the specs, but they really don't care. They need to understand how it impacts their experience.
Yeah, and we're always considering, is the next generation worth it? And that kind of leads me into like thoughts about like the Switch 2. And I wanted to talk about this today because I've had it for a week, almost a week and a half now. This is it, in case you want to see it. Have you seen the size? Have I showed you the size next to the original Switch?
I watched your video and I saw you put it up though for folks who may have not seen the video.
Let me put it together really quick. So this is, and I actually have the OG Switch right here too. So this is the Switch 2, and this is the Switch under it.
And please remember, Corey has Viking hands, so it looks small, but it's
no, dude. This thing. Well, here's the thing. This is my problem with it. Like, you see how thin that damn thing is? So that's a major problem for me. They put zero ergonomics into it, and when you see things coming out like the Xbox Handheld, which I also want to talk about, this is an interesting product because, like, when you look at this, if you look at the spec sheet versus like the OLED Switch, it's not a huge step for a second generation console. And honestly, I think this is the first time Nintendo is half-assed, and it's not the word. It's not the word. They took a model that works and they made it better. So, like, if you like the Switch, you're gonna love the Switch 2. no doubt about it. But it's not a generational leap in technology. They didn't
Right.
put OLED into the monitor. The battery life is not the most impressive. Everything about it is better in every single way, but it's not like, wow. Wow, this is incredible. You know, so it's like I've got mixed thoughts on it for the average person, because a lot of people are going to be like, should I pay scalper prices for this? Should I wait in line for this? Should I be trying to be at GameStop or Best Buy at 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning so I can make sure I'm the first one to get it? And that's where it gets hard as a reviewer to recommend, because it's like it's going to have a different value system to different people. And for me, the Switch 2 is... I pre-ordered it, and it literally sat on my porch for 5 hours, dude. They delivered.
We were on the phone. Remember, we were live when that was happening.
You're right. That's right. I went and brought it in to.
He was like, "Dude, this thing's been sitting here since 5:30."
Dude, I had pre-ordered from Walmart. They dropped it off at 5:30 in the morning. And my wife
no
just happened
notification.
to go outside. We put snacks out for our delivery folks, and when she went and put the snacks out around like 10:30, there it was sitting there, and I was like, "Bro, Switch 2 just sitting on my porch for 5 hours in Texas heat." Anyways,
right, in Texas heat and losing time to get the video up, because that's a hot topic.
I was telling her, I was like, man, when's this thing going to come in? Because I need to get this video out. And it's just been sitting there.
Dude, you just made a really great point, because this is what I love about reviews and user experiences and things like that. Whereas you dislike, maybe it sounds like, how thin that profile is.
Yeah.
But for me, that's actually better, right? And it's because my hands are smaller, but primarily my children play it. And so when it's larger and thicker, their fingers don't reach the buttons. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so that's the beauty about that I think about reviews. And we were just talking about this a second ago. User experience for me, I'm like, dude, that's much better, because when we're taking those freaking long 12-hour rides back home to Michigan, or when we're traveling for basketball to South Carolina and, you know, Florida and all this different stuff, and I put the Switch in the back seat with my 2 younger kids. I got a bigger screen, and now they can reach the buttons easier.
Right.
Is the way that I see that. Where on you're like, man, these damn things are thin, and you know, and I don't like it. So that's exactly what I was just saying a second ago. My vantage point automatically is like, damn, dude, I'm glad they made that damn thing thinner. That makes it make more sense for me. I wouldn't have thought about purchasing it before that.
Yeah, I will say there's one significant drawback to what they did, and it's actually the included controller. And I think this is actually, the more I think about it, the more I think this is a marketing push by Nintendo to push you to buy their Pro controller. Because if you look at like all Switches, the original and the Switch 2 come with this little handheld that holds your Joy-Cons.
Yeah.
And the problem is that there's this major gap right here, and you feel it the whole time that you're playing. And when you're playing, as you can see, the bumper buttons come around the shoulder to the side. So this is a big hand problem, but as I'm playing, I'm constantly hitting those bumper buttons. And like, obviously Mario Kart World is like the only real Switch 2 game besides upgrades. And it's like, you're constantly accidentally launching your weapons, your shells or bananas and stuff like that, or you're accidentally jumping and sliding too early because of this controller. And then there's like this gap right here, whereas the other one, it was more
I see
of
it
like
in there. It's smoother.
Yeah, it's like flush. And so I think that this is a setback in my mind because of that. And I think it's a push for people to buy the Pro controller. I think they really want that to happen.
I'll be honest, like, do you actually buy the Nintendo Pro controller, or do you just buy other controllers?
I bought the original Pro controller for one reason, and it's because I had this thing called the fixture or something like that, and basically what it was a mount that snapped on to only the Switch Pro controller, and it would hold the Switch up high. So it was like that you held the controller and it held the Switch elevated, and I bought it because it only fit that controller. Now there's a bunch on the market that can fit on like any controller. So I bought it for that. I will say, Nintendo does make it worth it if you find the value in what that controller can do. It's kind of like I don't know everything about what the new Pro controller can do because I don't have it yet. It is very expensive. I think it's like $85 for this controller, which is nuts. But if you look at like the difference in like the PS5 versus PS4 controller, when the PS5 first came out, it had the adaptive triggers with the motors in them, and it was just a really good controller. And then you look at like the elite versions, like Xbox has, you know more about the Xbox Elite controllers, and it's like if they're going to price it at that, it needs to be worth it. I will say, the quality for the original Switch's Pro controller was really, really good and kind of the gold standard. And a lot of times you'll find third-party products come in and they make a company's product better so that you can buy theirs. Nintendo's Pro controller, I don't think there's really third-party controllers that can beat it. Like, they do a really good job of making it work really well with the Switch. And that's just my experience. I've had third-party controllers that for PC, Xbox and PlayStation that are always better than the original.
Right.
Nintendo's the one exception for me.
I got a few. But
For the Switch.
Yeah, but you know, I have like what 30, 40 controllers though. You know, something dumb like that.
Oh
like,
yeah, your controller friends completely ignored that email, by the way.
Look very similar to your microphone fans, but no, they responded.
I'm about to say they responded.
But honestly,
yeah.
they haven't responded to me either. So I'm wondering if they're just like on holiday or something like that. You know, they do that and
damn 2-month holiday. It's been a minute.
Hey, that's the benefits of not living in the U.S. but so yeah, I'm actually waiting on an email back from them as well, based on the video that I'm working on. But
Okay.
so I think it's maybe something altogether different. Maybe that person's not even at the company anymore. Sometimes that happens and you just lose contact, like because I've emailed them twice, but we'll see. But yeah, like I use some pro controllers, even and never mind. I don't want to say their name because they didn't want to work with me. I don't want to give them a sponsor, but the controller, the company that you worked with before, that you have the handheld. That controller works really well with the Switch. I've let the kids play with it. You have the G8. I won't say anymore. Don't you say nothing.
That's a bummer. That's a bummer. Like,
Yeah,
companies are like that.
I do. Like, I don't. I'll put it. No, we won't put a link. We'll put a comment before in the comment section after this, so you can
Just
see what it is.
Search G8 on my channel and you'll see it.
Yeah, do that. But they have a really good controller that works really well with the Switch. Also PC, and I use it all the time. It's actually sitting over there. I had it in my recent studio tour. It's sitting on my thing over there because my computer's connected to my television over there. So, and I use the controller to play that, and then I can also connect it to my Switch. So I typically, because I'm really big on like the Xbox style controller.
Yeah.
In my hands. Whenever I've used the Switch, I've always used a third-party PC-style controller to connect to it because I don't like the small type thing. I like the feeling that I like. Xbox controller is my favorite controller.
That's another thing that irritated me about Nintendo is the Joy-Con joysticks. They didn't do. I don't think they're Hall effect. They're that real shallow travel kind of where it's like I don't have another controller to show. Oh yeah, I do. Like here is an Xbox controller, and you can see how much these joysticks move, right? And then you bring up the Switch 2 next to it, and they're so shallow.
There's
I
no
hate
movement.
that, dude. Because
there's no movement.
When you have here's the thing, I really have to monitor the things that I say to make sure it's not me complaining because I have big hands.
Yeah.
And when I say I have big hands, I mean it's 9 inches. And then 10.5 inches. So it's like really large hands.
Yeah.
And so I try to make sure that this is something that everybody will have a problem with, not just me.
Yeah.
I think joystick travel on any Switch product except for the Pro Controller is not good. But for me, I think I'd be interested in testing more third-party controllers with the Switch because once I got the Pro Controller, I never needed anything else, and I like the ergonomics of it. And it almost felt like when it comes to like that controller versus others, to me, I was initially thinking it's like blue bubble versus green bubble whenever you're Apple to Apple versus Apple to Android, connection is faster, it's more intuitive, it automatically looks for a Nintendo product. So I think it just works really well, and there's no reason to need anything other. But again, I haven't tested as much as you have, so.
It's interesting you say that. You remember when we were at the booth at CES for MSI, and they had the map of the hand and the finger travel and stuff like that. I would be very interested to understand the product manager's thought process on the Joy-Con travel on that Switch, and who the actual primary customer is for that. Because for an adult, again, like going back to like Switch being primarily for me, for children, that throw, if you'll call it that, is better for their hands because they don't have the largest fingers and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so I that's where my mind always goes on things like that. Like, did they make it just good enough so that adults wouldn't complain, but optimal for children or smaller handed folks? You get what I'm saying? Like,
no, that's a fair point.
And also thinking about the demographics of where Nintendo is, like their customer base, right? They're Asian based, right? They're Japan.
Japan, yeah.
Japan, right? And so typically smaller stature folks, right? As far as like their main demographics of their national user or whatever, however you want to describe that,
Little
right?
bitty thumbs.
Yeah. What?
Little bitty thumbs.
But smaller statured folks, right?
Yeah.
So like, is the travel of that Joy-Con, like a combination of all of those things, right? Because that's something that, is A/B tester, right? As you know from being inside of tech, right? Product managers and stuff like that, they're going to get a group of folks and they're going to say, okay, for this group, they need this. This group, they need this. My primary group is this. How do we balance that, right? To make sure that we have our primary users, taken care of, but also it expands enough for others.
That is a fair point. And yeah, I think that's probably what's going on. They're because like obviously this is a very kid-friendly console in general. And yeah, I don't know. I never thought about that, but it makes total sense.
That's my whole opinion on the Switch. Like, it's not generational leap, but my kids play Roblox far more than anything else, and that is damn near 8-bit 3D, gaming. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, like,
what I'll say about the Switch too is that like they took the things that, because I think the Switch 1, if you look at every Nintendo release, every console has been so different than the one before it. And this is the first time they took a console. I mean, maybe the Wii U is kind of the exception, but it was kind of ahead of its time and the tech wasn't ready yet. So it didn't catch fire like it would have.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep clearing my throat. But like they took what people liked about the Switch 1 and they just made it better. And that is the one thing I appreciate aside from the actual joystick. So and for instance, what I'm talking about specifically is a couple of different things. Obviously the size, the screen quality, the blacks on this it looks OLED, honestly. Like if you look at it, because I showed it in my video of it next to the original LCD. They're both LCD, but
contrast
man,
is much
it's
better.
got a very good contrast. Excuse me, gosh. But one thing, if you'll notice on the Joy-Cons, that like you can tell, obviously not having to slide them, but like the bumper buttons. I think Nintendo, when they first did this, they didn't. Can I get a good focus on that? I don't.
No, don't forget you're on the Black Magic now.
Oh, no. Okay, so you see the little gray dots on this one, and you see the big old bumper buttons on this. See the size difference?
Yeah.
I think Nintendo did not. They made it a fun feature to use it like this, and I don't think they anticipated how popular that was going to become.
Yep.
And so they took the things that I think they made it a cool feature, but they didn't know if it was going to be really cool.
Yep.
And because people loved it so much, they expanded the button size and made it more comfortable from an ergonomic perspective.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be a telltale sign if you use it as a mouse, because you can use these Joy-Cons as a mouse, and they suck as a mouse. Like they're not meant for that.
You said that on your video too. I remember you said that about them not understanding how many people would actually use that Joy-Con as a handheld controller versus having it attached.
Well, and the same thing, they didn't anticipate how many people were going to use this kickstand on the back, this crappy one, so they made a bigger, larger kickstand that can also almost entirely go flat, or it can keep it up like at a nice angle.
Yeah, because you couldn't going back to my kid. Yeah, that little thin one, right? And it pops off a lot too, right? And so going back to my kids, like they will do that in the truck. Like they'll sit that thing up while we're driving, you know what I'm saying? And they'll be back there with Mario Karting or even Super Mario World, one with the hat and one with Mario and stuff like that. And I don't think they understood how often that would be used.
Right. So that's exactly it. And just like the original Switch only has USB-C on the bottom for docking or charging, and they didn't realize how many people were just going to set the screen far away from them. So on the Switch 2, there's one on the bottom and one on the top.
Yeah, that's
USB-C right here. And so it's all those things where it's like, this is what makes the Switch 2 a good console. It's not like this revolutionary thing. A lot of people are calling it the Switch 1.5. And I think that's actually a really fair thing to call it. Like the OLED was like the 1.25, and then this is like the 1.5, because it doesn't do anything different than the Switch.
Right.
But it's not supposed to. So I guess it still is the Switch 2. This is where you see how I'm conflicted.
See, but let me ask you a question. Xbox One, Xbox 360, Xbox One, Xbox S, and S.
Okay.
What do they do? What do they do different?
I hate those system names.
4 different generations. What do they do
Fair point. More power, more resolution.
You get what I'm saying? And so, like, with that being said, I think, as an example, the Rogue Ally, I love my Ally. And you wanted to talk about the Xbox Handheld, which is partnered with the Ally. I love my Ally. My kids won't touch it. They will not touch it. Yeah. It's just too complicated for them. Like, when I first got it, they were like, oh. But now it's like the Logitech G Cloud, which is still my favorite handheld. My kids use that more than, like, Apollo walks around the house with it. He goes from gaming to YouTube, back to gaming, to Fortnite, to Roblox, all in the Logitech G Cloud. And he takes it with him. He puts it in his backpack. My Ally, I said, hey, man, you want to take this one? And I'm thinking $700, max chip, AMD max chip, all this different stuff. No, and it's like, okay, so the Ally is just sitting there right now. They're playing that Logitech G Cloud and the Switch because they're just so freaking simple. You know what I mean? And so that's why, like, with the Switch, I was kind of, talking about this earlier. We as reviewers, we're so like, man, you got all these other console handhelds out here that are just so powerful, and Switch didn't make any changes. You know what I mean? And but the Switch really understands. They really understand. They're not gonna beat an Ally, a Steam Deck, or anything like that with us. Right. They're not going to, and so they're going to continue to stay that path. Well, here's our audience, and we're not going to diversify.
So, what I'm going to do for my follow-up video on it? I'm going to, that meme with Kylo Ren where he's yelling, more! So I'm going to use that meme, and I'm going to say the Switch 2 is really good if you love the original Switch, but you want, and then it's going to have him going, more! Like, really intense, because that's what it is. It's more of the same, but in a good way. And for me, I can't recommend standing in line and paying scalper prices because, I can take, let me show you this. This is something I reviewed a while back. Oh, it's like 5 feet away. It's too far. So anyways,
you probably can reach it if you just stretch.
I mean, my arms are long, but they ain't quite that long. But no, what it is, it's an external screen that makes the Switch. You know what? Let me get it. Just hold tight for just a minute. I'll be right back.
I think I know what you're talking about. It's that big screen that you did a review on. If it's what I think he's talking about, it's like a 10-inch screen that you sit the Switch body down into on the backside, and then it gives you this big real estate. And I was kind of jealous when they sent that out to him, but his channel is more focused on like gaming handhelds and controllers and the gaming space and different accessories for gaming and stuff like that. And so he's going to have more of an audience for that. But if it's what I think
that took a second to find.
Is it that big screen? I was telling him I think it's that. You just put your headphones back on. I was telling him I think it's that big screen that you did a review on. Is that what it is? I knew it. That thing is freaking sweet. Let's talk about it.
Okay, so this right here, it's from G Story. This thing costs $150, $160, and here is the Switch 2 screen by itself, right? And you can see
does it fit the Switch 2?
No.
Oh, okay.
It shouldn't. But it gives you all of the screen quality, but you put your original Switch in it, and at this point, for how much you can get an original Switch for, you just slide your Switch in the back, your OG Switch, like that. Oh, then you put and this is not a product like I'm not marketing this. I'm just saying, like, I'm trying to tell people.
It's a sweet product, though.
Right, so now you have a full-on Switch that's also a docking station that you can still pull the Joy-Cons off, and it has this right here. Like, why would you buy a Switch 2 when you can get a Switch 1 with this screen for less, than half the price? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or about half the price. So this is where, for me, I can't recommend going out of your way to stand in line and go crazy for it and pay scalper prices. But if you purchase it and you like the Switch, you're going to love it in every way. So you got to like the Switch first.
I love that you brought that up because this is actually something I wanted to talk about at some point in the podcast today.
Yeah.
Is that you don't always need new. I wanted to talk about that because that's a video that I'm working on for my channel right now, like with all of the conversations around the different camera bodies and stuff coming out. And I don't know if I sent it to you, but I was editing some photos from my Fuji X-T3 the other day from the last time, not the last time, but the first time I went to Myrtle Beach for basketball. And I was like, damn, at the time I owned that Fuji X-T3, I was brand new to content creation and stuff like that. And so I didn't necessarily understand, shooting in Fuji Raw and different stuff like that. But I had taken some pictures in Fuji Raw, and so as you know, that the audience doesn't know that I'm switching from Premiere Pro to DaVinci Resolve and different stuff like that. And so I've been using Lightroom a lot to decide whether or not I'm going to keep paying for that, now that I'm not going to be paying for Premiere Pro. So I was like, let me just go back and edit some photos. And damn, that camera takes some really freaking good photos. Fuji in general has really great color science. A lot of people think it's the best. They just think the camera series are just not good.
Yeah.
They think the color science is really good with Fuji. Turn on all the different recipes, as they call it in the Fuji world. So this is one thing that I wanted to talk about. And if we pivot just slightly a little bit, and we can still talk about the Switch and other stuff as we lead into the next topic, I don't think that you always need to go out and buy brand new tech when it's time to make that next purchase. Yep. I'm very big on understanding the user and what the user needs. And we talked about this, or at least I talked about this a lot when we talked about the Sony FX2 versus the Lumix S1 II, Lumix S1R2, and Lumix S12E. Open gate and all this different stuff over on Lumix. And then it's like, well, the FX3 is 3 years old and A7C2 is 2 years old and all this different stuff. I really think it boils down to what are your actual needs? What will you do on a day-to-day basis? And let that be the guiding marker on whether or not you need to buy top of the line brand new or save money and buy the Switch 1 and something like that and have best of both worlds. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so give me your opinion on that.
Completely agree. And like the worst thing, like this mentality would destroy the Switch 2 launch because Nintendo came out with one game that was ready for the Switch 2. That's the thing. Like, if they had a full library of, like, the Switch 2's coming out with 15 new games that are only available on the Switch 2 and their next-gen, like, technology, like, you know, when you're looking at a screen size of this, even if it's 7.9 inches versus the 6 inches and it's, you know, better quality, it's not going to be that much better on this small of a screen. So you can't justify saying, oh, I'm going to pay or I'm going to upgrade older games that I have whenever you can get a screen like the G Story that I just showed you. Because, like, the Switch 2 is 1080p and it can output 4K in a dock. And I'm sorry, but 4K TVs nowadays, like, 4K doesn't look like it did 10 years ago, like, in terms of, like, wow, that's amazingly crystal clear. 4K, it's not becoming antiquated, but it is not as impressive anymore. And so when you can take a screen that, like, this will treat this like a dock, and this will be 1080p, and so you're getting the same thing with the same games, there is no reason to upgrade. If it's your first time buying into the ecosystem and you want to get the best of the best, sure, but, like, there is not a legitimate reason why you should spend the money on the Switch 2 yet, because there's no library there. You know, and that's what it really comes down to.
Agreed.
You can get a little bit better quality of games that might have a little bit better frame rate, but, like, Nintendo games are not, like, super graphics heavy games. Now they have some third party titles in their catalog, obviously,
expanding
but even then, like Hogwarts Legacy, Subnautica, all these games, they are brought down so much in the resolution and graphics that it doesn't matter if it's on more powerful hardware, because they're designed for that, right? And so there's going to be at least a year before there is an actual need based on game catalog to buy the Switch 2, and that really is what it comes down to.
Agree, and I 100% agree with you, and that's why that's justified why you shouldn't wait in line for this product right now.
100%.
Because you'd only be waiting in line for it just to say that you have the Switch 2 today. An example of that is I brought the PlayStation VR 2 brand new. I'm talking about I pre-ordered that thing, showed up. There was only two, 3 games that worked with it at launch.
Yeah.
And honestly, to this
there's still only 2, 3 games that work with it.
There's still only like 5 games now. You know what I mean? Like, that is even worth purchasing. Call it a Breath of the what the heck is the name of it? Horizon, call it a whatever it is. The Mountain, call it a mountain. That game is freaking phenomenal. So much to the point where I get stomach sick every time I play it. Like full on nausea. Like, you know, I play it 30 minutes and I have to take it off because I'm woozy and I feel like I've been climbing mountains.
It takes a while to get over that.
It takes a while. Hey, I'm telling you, sit there and it's like you're still coming down off of it. So you go into it knowing you're gonna feel like shit afterwards, right? And but
quick gamer tip: if you are a VR player, get a neck fan that blows air on you while you do it, because that moving air will ground you and make you not feel as like sick and nauseated.
That's good information. I've never known that. Really great information.
You're
but
welcome.
like I say all that to say that unless you really need that new feature that's advertised as the new feature on the new product,
Right.
9 times out of 10 we don't. You know, like it's all like, and we can talk about this regarding your cameras, right? Your camera scenarios. Like you tested the Sonys, you know, a couple Sonys. You have the Canon R8s.
Comparison.
You know, you test the Canon. You have the Canon R8. You've used them for a while, and then you are right now filming with the Blackmagic 6K, right? And so there's one thing I want to say before you give your opinion on this. Your video quality with the R8s was already fantastic. It already looked amazing. And so to the average person watching,
Means a lot.
right, like the nod, you know, like it already looked really freaking good. But us as creatives, we need more, and that's the fine line. That's the difference, right? And so as creatives, we need more to be able to create what we want to create.
It's
so
funny.
Now share your
It's funny you brought that up because that testing between the Sony and Canon cameras directly led into my thought process of the Switch 2. And because I like you tried to, everyone that follows us knows that you've been talking to me about Sony cameras for a while. And Sony thankfully sent out some loaner cameras for me to check out for a few weeks because it's really expensive to change your whole system. I have the Canon M50 EOS R and 2 R8s with a bunch of glass. And it's like, to send all of that in and trade it in to then purchase Sony products, it's like, God, I want to know if it's worth it first. So huge shout out to Sony for doing that. And so for me, it was like, there's the headache of sending everything in. Then I'm going down to less cameras because I'm upgrading camera bodies. And is it actually worth it? Like, is there enough features that make this amount of effort worth it? And what is my ROI long term? And that's what it kind of comes down to.
return on investment.
Return on investment. So, like, what am I going to get back out of this for the effort I'm going to put into it and potential money, because I'm kind of going back to ground zero and starting fresh with a new system that I don't know. And think about this, too. If you break down how much time we spend on content and how much we make per hour, it's pennies, right? Because we're not big-time creators, and so it's like, you really got to make your time count. If I have to learn an entirely new camera system, like, there's a lot that goes into making the decision of changing cameras. So whenever, and I say all that to say is that Sony completely made me want to switch to Sony, and I will. So for me to get to that point, it can't be incrementally better. It can't be, it's just a little bit better, and I just got to have that little bit better. I'm not that kind of person, and I'll always recommend to my viewers, like, if it gives you 80% of what you need, you don't need that last 20%. There's this thing in marriage called the 80-20 rule, where it's like a lot of times people will they'll have 80% of what they need in a marriage to make them happy.
Ooh, be careful.
But listen, this is an actual thing. Like, listen to this theory because this is real.
I know the 80-20 rule, but sometimes
be
careful what you say.
Right. I'm not guilty of it, so I'm not worried. But there's like someone will come along and give 20% of that, and that little extra, like, oh, it's new, it feels different, and it gives you 20% of what you're not getting, and you lose sight of what you're used to day to day, and it looks that much better, right? And so you go after that 20%, and then it screws your whole world up. And that is like what I'm trying to avoid and trying to recommend to my audience is don't get caught in the hype, and don't think that just because it's a little bit better resolution, a little bit better screen size and ergonomics, it's not worth the payment difference to get it and the actual output effort of trying to procure a Switch 2. So for me, this is kind of a long-winded explanation, I know, but for me, whenever I started testing these Sony cameras, it was so much better and so feature rich for the way that I'm going to use it. It's worth the effort. Because like the autofocus, oh my God, I really underestimated Sony's autofocus. The webcam capabilities were fantastic. The 4K 120, I couldn't get it to work, and this was a little frustrating because I bought a $100 SD card that was a V90. It kept telling me you got to have a V90 to make 4K 120 work. Well, here it is. It's SanDisk. It's reputable, and the Sony rep was like, "Nah, it's got to be Sony brand. I bet it would have worked if you had that." I'm like,
SanDisk.
What about it? You don't like SanDisk?
You should have went Lexar at minimum.
Okay, well, you should have told me that, man.
You didn't ask.
I got a really nice SD card now. I need to return it. I'll just keep it. But anyways,
no, you still use it. You're going to use it at some point.
But what made me decide that I am going to make this switch is it gives me everything I needed already, and I don't lose anything. But what it brings and gives me more of is so much better than what I have that it's worth the effort. Because I'm going to trade in 4 cameras and all of these lenses for 1 camera and like maybe 2 lenses if I'm lucky. Yeah. And that's a big delta. And that's so. Anyways, that's how I look at like product. That's how if you're going to get excited about a new product, is it game changing enough, or does it give you enough without taking away to consider an upgrade? Does that make sense? Does that answer?
It answers my question completely. So 2 things before we move on. First, I would have just compared the 80-20 rule to like a new job versus a wedding relationship, just so that I can't use that against you in the future. But and then 2, I just want to hear you say it, man.
I've already told you.
I want to hear it publicly.
We've already talked about this publicly.
I want to, just in case it's the first episode.
Cozy was right about Sony. I'll let you have it. And here's the thing.
But first, before we move on from that, because I'm just being an ass, but I really like the R8 though, and I hope you keep one of them. Yeah. I hope you keep one of them for future like comparisons and different things like that, because I do really think that's a really good camera, and you haven't used it really for photography and stuff like that, but
it takes good pictures.
Yeah, and personally that could be your personal when you go on vacation with family and different stuff like that, and you don't want to take your $2,000, $3,000 Sony along with you, take that R8 with you, right, and have a nice pancake lens and keep it with you. But I really do, because I've also thought about, like, I don't have any Canon camera bodies. I don't like Canon. Let's be honest and clear about that. But they do have good products for the right person. And should I ever need to review a Canon glass or something like that, I'm like, that R8 is like $1,200. His content looks really good. That could be something that I could get just to have that body to say, hey, I can review your EF mount lens too. Type situation. So I would encourage you, like, if possible, financially feasible, keep one of them for at least, those things that you could use them for.
I've thought about that. I would like to keep one of them. It does reduce my trade-in power because, the bodies are worth a decent amount. They're more recent. And man, I've loved the R8. It's still a good camera. And that's the thing. Yeah. Like, it doesn't make, like, considering Sony and how much I enjoyed those cameras, doesn't make me dislike Canon at all. I mean, the experience I've had with the brand at, like, NAB and working, like, talking with their tech rep and stuff like that, I don't like the experience with the company. But the R8 has a sweet spot. It has a spot in my heart for me because of what it gave me. Because, like, for me, tiny creator space, I mean, you've seen a studio tour of how small the space is that I'm working with. And when you take that and mix it with a really large person like myself, having a crop sensor and trying to film 4K is impossible. So it gave me access. It basically almost doubled my studio size because I'm not having to deal with a crop factor. And it gave me 4K 60. And, like, it gave me so many things that I was like, I need another one. So I bought a second. And so now I have 2 of them. Yeah. So I at least will trade one in. But then, the ZVE one does everything that and more. Yeah. But it's also $600 more of a camera. So it's like,
I would say because I'm waiting for the ZVE 1 Mark II. I'm waiting. Like, I am going to buy one, but I am waiting.
When do you think that might actually come out, though?
Well, the thing of it is, we don't know because their product lines are delayed right now, right? And typically, like, if you can say historical data, like the FX, Sony A7S III was 2020, and then 2021 it released, like announced in 20, and then released in 2021. That's when I purchased it. It's my main camera, or at least my talking head camera. And then the FX3 was maybe like a year later, somewhere around there. And then after that, you had the ZVE1, which was like, so they basically hit all lines. They hit the hybrid line, which is the alpha. And then they hit the cinema line with the FX3. And then they created that ZV line, which is like their vlog line for content creators, right? And so the ZVE1 and ZVE10 Mark II, and then the ZV1 are like their vlog cameras. And so it's like, if you think about that, we should get the FX3 Mark II before the EV1 Mark II.
I still don't think there's going to be an FX3 Mark II. Like,
I think there will be. I just don't think there will be a Sony Alpha A7S III Mark II.
But remember we talked about this, and I spoke to someone at Sony that it was a software update. It's not a physical body.
But there's going to be a difference because of the screen on the back. There's going to be some small differences. There may not be.
If there is, they will discontinue the FX3 lineup. They can't
I
just
don't think
drop it
so.
in price.
I don't think so.
I think they will, because it gets too close to
I
like
think
the
the
A7S
FX3 Mark II
and-
might have open gate, and that keeps the FX3 still viable.
But the problem is that like Sony's fighting, it's kind of cannibalizing its own camera lineup because of how close the price ranges are to each other. And now here's the thing: if you look at it in terms of like Apple is a great example of, oh, if you want that extra terabyte of SSD, it's another $200. But what's $200 when you're already spending $3,000? So there is that argument,
but that's why I think it's still viable to keep it. Because of that Apple tax, right? It's the same thought process. So, for instance,
but if you're looking at tariff manufacturing and shipping, is it like if you're cutting down the margin of what you're making on an older camera, like for the tariff cost, I think they would discontinue it.
But that's why they don't actually change their price. You don't see very many sales on Sony cameras for that reason. They keep their value regardless of what the market does, because that camera, $32.98 when it released, is still $32.98. You get what I'm saying? Like 3 years later, and so open gate may not be something the average person needs. So if you don't need that, get the FX3, because it's still damn near the perfect camera. But if you need open gate, get the FX3 Mark II.
It's a good point on them never going on sale, because like Canon, like it's always on sale. Like
and that's
every
why it doesn't
month
make sense. That's why they actually cannibalize their stuff, because they do go on sale. Because it's like, I'm just going to wait until the next sale. But the FX3, you know, it's not going on sale. If it goes on sale, it's $200. So it's like, am I going to wait 6 months for $200, or am I going to make this money today? You know, because that's a cinema camera. What
do you think would make the ZV-E1 Mark II better? Because like for me,
heat dissipation,
100% fan would be nice.
That's period. That's the first thing
at all.
No fan, and that's the biggest thing. Yep.
Other than and they better not lock 4K 120 behind a paywall. Like just automatically included into this firmware of the camera. I don't understand why they did that, and they got their hands slapped by the consumer base pretty hard for locking it behind that. And it's free now, but still the fact that you have to go download a file,
especially because that 12 megapixel sensor, that CMOS 12 megapixel sensor, is capable of 4K 120 with no crop. So why would you do that?
That is right. That's one thing that'll make me never support a company, is if they have features built into a product that you have to pay to unlock, but it's already in the product. I hate that. If I'm going to buy a DLC, I will, like, you know what I mean? Like, if it's already in part of the game, and like I can see that the mission start point, and I got start point, and I have to pay to go on that mission, but it's already baked into the game, go F yourself. Like, that's the way I think about it with products too.
Well, the crazy thing about that is that a lot of products have that secondary feature built into it, because they're reusing either the motherboard or something like that. They just didn't put the module, or they didn't unlock the software, and you're just never aware of it.
Well, then don't tell me that.
You said what?
I said, don't tell me that.
Yeah, so that's realistically, like when you have product lines that have like a base version, then a higher end version, they typically are built on the exact same assembly line with the same motherboard, with the same blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. They just don't activate certain parts of that thing, and you never even know it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's the only thing with this world, like the camera world, is like we have that access. We know that the S1 II by Lumix uses the same sensor from the old A7 III from Sony. And that's why people are so mad that the Lumix S1 II has all those features, open gate, all those different frame rates, all those different, you know, all of that. And it's a sensor from cameras older than the current cameras that are currently old on Sony, right? And so that's why people get upset in that conversation. But at the end of the day, firmware and software, I'm being extra. About 70% of the time is more important than the actual hardware itself.
Yeah.
The product is driven by the software, and that's how you can have the same OLED panel in a Sony, a Samsung, etc., and they all look freaking different because of the processing and, you know, and all that different stuff. And so I say that all the time. It's not always the hardware, but that's why Apple is so good, because they own hardware and software at the same time. Products come together, and they take those, you know, whack ass phones, and they make them what they are. Because they control the software and the hardware together, right?
Yeah.
And it makes an amazing phone. You know?
Yeah. But I will say that, like, I think we're a couple years away from a ZV-E1, because like it came out in May of 2023, so it just eclipsed 2 years. in the midst of tariffs, it's
three years is 3 years is standard. So technically, we were expecting an FX2 this year based on their historical release dates.
And that came out. That got announced.
The FX3 hasn't come out yet. The Mark II.
I thought you said 2. Okay.
The FX3 Mark II. But we were expecting it this year, right? And so there's still 2 cameras that have been registered, right? That we are expecting to release this year. One of them should be the A7R5 or A7V, and then the other one was expected to be the FX3 Mark II, right? Late this year, like third going into fourth quarter of this year, potentially first quarter of 2026, which should put the ZVE1 Mark II in the mid to late half of 2026. And because I have so many camera bodies, I'm completely fine with waiting.
See,
I can make my FX30 work until then.
For me, the ZVE1 is that much of an upgrade where I would go ahead and trade and make it happen.
Yeah.
And really because of like the things that I like to do with product videography for my stuff, the autofocus is just, that's the one thing that I keep coming back to where I'm like, God, that was good.
I'm telling you.
So well, and the low light was really nice because I usually control all the lighting in my studio. So I didn't think that was going to be a concern, but I didn't realize how much more saturation and how deeper the blacks were in the shadows because of the low light performance. I didn't realize I wasn't getting that out of my Canon. So Canon has got really good color science, and fresh out of the camera, it looks great. But man, the low light on it just is not bad. It's just when you see it next to like, and again, apples to oranges because it's a much more expensive camera that's much more modern. Well, not modern, honestly. It came out around at the same time, but yeah.
It's that sensor. It's that 12 megapixel sensor. It's the larger pixel density, the larger pixel sizes that allow for that light to be captured a little bit better. And it just opens up, when you're able to do that, it opens up the rest of your camera, the rest of your exposure triangle. Like you don't have to go high ISO now. So that means you remove the noise more, right? There's less noise in the picture. There's more dynamic range if you go like, and I'm starting to test and shoot with raw footage. Like photos is like, it's been easy to start working with raw photos.
Yeah,
but when you go into video, it's different because you're like, last thing you want to do is record a 30-minute, talking head scenario, and then you come back and you're like, damn, I messed up the highlights on that, so I got to record that whole thing over. But go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, to your point about low light performance, allowing deeper ranges on things, what I didn't think about is how much better it allows me to control my aperture and play with my bokeh, and like what kind of blur do I want behind the product, because I can like increase that f-stop to a higher amount and have less of a blur. And still get good lighting because I don't have to like crank my ISO up super high. And that was what I was not thinking about because of low light performance. Because low light performance, like, I have that product spinner and it shows things in the background, or shows the background behind it. All of that is, that dark background impacts the low light performance of the camera. So for me to be able to get that blurry enough with the product in shot, not make it overly dark or overly bright, but get a nice blur in the background, I have so much more control over a camera that can do that. And like keeping it in focus, there is zero focus breathing with Sony because its autofocus it's so damn fast. Like that's one of the things. I didn't get as much footage as I wanted to, but one of the things I compared was moving an object in front of the camera, in front of a macro lens, to see how fast can it focus on like 5 feet away versus a couple inches away, and it's just so fast. Because like the Canon camera takes probably about a second, which is still pretty fast. But quick. Sony was like, as it was coming into frame, it was in focus. And then as I pulled it away, the wall was in focus. And I've just never seen speed like that. It was really mind-blowing.
Now you know why I scoffed at the comment at the Canon booth when he said the 70-200 f4 macro lens wasn't a real macro. It's because of how fast, like my 70-200, which is my sports lens for the most part, right? It also has
macro is not based on speed, though. It's based on focal length. Like how close can it actually focus?
Right, but there's still a speed, like, so there's still, agreed, but there still is, like, as you're moving in and out with a long range macro, like, we're not talking about like a standard 90 to blah, blah, blah. We're talking about like in studio with the 70-200 being able to zoom in on something really close, right?
Sure.
That still plays a part, right? How fast you can catch focus with the macro on a lens like that. Not as much so on a smaller, like a 90 millimeter, or, you have a lot of macro lenses, right? But that 70-200, when you're in a small space, I'm not sitting, you know, for instance, if I had this as an example, I'm not sitting, you know, here on the lens. I'm sitting more, you know, like this with that lens, right? And so finding focus is harder at a further distance with that type of lens. And so that's where it plays a part in that speed of how fast it can focus.
To that point, not having good low light performance, you can't increase the heck out of the aperture and make up for it with ISO if you don't have good low light performance. And like, that's one of the things. I've got a 100mm macro lens, and I've never been able to get the full performance out of it because macro is so finicky. Like, unless you set like a f/16 aperture at that focal length, and I know we're getting really technical here, but like, it's hard to not have one little focus circle and the rest of the product is blurry. Like, it's hard to work with those lenses like that. That's why I typically go with a 35 or 24 macro. That's like those are the ones that I love working with.
Laowa has that new 15 f4 macro. Have you seen that?
No, but I would like to look at it.
I want to try that out.
What mount is it? What mount is it?
They have it on E. They have it on L. They pretty much have it on a lot. EF. Maybe Z as well. It just reached out, but the L mount version isn't auto focus. It's manual focus, but the rest of them are autofocus.
See, I would be E mount when I get Sony. Like, obviously all the Black Magic stuff is L mount, and so that is going to be for static shots. But also, like, when I'm doing, you know, like my product reviews, and I'm like, a lot of times I like to have a second angle and like hold it up to the camera to like do that. Like, how fast it autofocuses actually impacts your editing time too. Because you're not having to wait in editing for it. And it's just like all these little incremental things add up to just
like
be
that
like
T-Move video you're still
no-brainer.
getting trashed for a couple of years ago talking about
God.
the autofocus. Like, you wouldn't even had any issues with Sony.
You know, it's so weird where you get comments from a 2-year-old video and people are like, oh, your autofocus is ass. And you're like, have you seen anything in the last 2 years? Because I've gotten a lot better. Like, do you not
Did you look at the date of the video when you watched it? Like,
yeah, dude.
Like, this is completely wrong, bro. That's a 2-year-old video.
And it's just the tech space that it's like that. Like, because I have like another channel that was...
Tech space is aggressive.
Oh, very. I have a tall channel. That was my, as you know, my first ever YouTube channel. And I did one recording back when I was a total newbie. My auxiliary cord wasn't plugged all the way into my camera, and the audio was trash. And it was like, I had to really do a lot of editing on the back end to try to get it to even be somewhat. But I was like, I just filmed this thing for 40 minutes straight. It was before I started chopping videos up. And I'm not going to redo all this. And I posted it, and I've not gotten one bad comment in 5 years of that video being live about how bad the audio is. And if you listen to it, it's like, oh my god, like I couldn't
like
listen
you
to it
posted
myself.
that, like,
Right. And I never got trashed once. But in the tech community, if you get one thing wrong, and now the engagement's great. You know, the engagement's fantastic. But if you get one thing wrong or misinterpret one thing, it's like, oh. And in every video, it never fails. I say something either incorrectly or I get something wrong. And that's the stuff where I think I get a little jealous of Marquez because he's so effortlessly reads from a bulleted list and gets it really right. But honestly, he's able to do that because of how much time he spends testing one product. And I don't do enough of that. I'm not a full-time creator, so I've got a job, family obligations, all this other stuff, and I just don't have time to test stuff. I'm trying to do that with this Switch. So anyways, it makes it hard to do that. But I do want to pivot, unless you have any more camera talk. I definitely want to talk about the Xbox handheld.
Yeah, let's pivot. And let me pull some stuff up while you bring us into that.
So this is interesting because I think it was 2 episodes ago we talked about Xbox is not releasing a handheld, and like that was the news. And then literally like a month later, here's the Xbox handheld, but it's not Xbox's handheld, and that's one thing important distinction that I want to make. It is a partnership with ROG Ally, who is oh my god, ROG Ally is Asus, right? No, yeah, Asus is ROG Ally. Golly, dude. Anyway, so it's called the ROG Ally X, but it is the first time that Xbox has basically logoed it. They have an Xbox button on it, and it is designed to be an Xbox like handheld in mind. So it's really kind of a hybrid. It's not a true like Microsoft is making this, and I want to be very clear about that. So, but it's the first time Xbox has done this, and I'm excited about it because the it's ugly. It really is not a pretty looking device. Yeah, but what's that?
That thing's ugly, bro.
Yeah, it's really ugly. It's really grody looking, but the ergonomics to me look great. And I saw one of my favorite YouTubers, Russ from Retro Game Core. They flew him out to LA to check it out, and to see him hold it and compare it next to a Steam Deck, which he brought with him, it's like Oh, that makes it look a lot better than it is. Show a worse picture. Can you scroll down a little bit? Yeah, look at that nasty thing, bro. That looks like it's that looks terrible. And that's their final design.
That's the final design.
And it's based on the Xbox controller, right? But for me, even though I don't like the joystick being on the bottom like right like that, and I wish more would do the Steam Deck option, it still looks ergonomically much more satisfying for someone like me. And having Game Pass just natively on there with its own launch platform, I don't think this has a laptop like desktop Windows experience like it does like with like the original ROG Ally, which is one of my big complaints. I don't want to go through the rigmarole of going through a desktop experience. I just want to get in and play, and that's why I never touch my Ally. I only play my Steam Deck. And so I'll be interested to see how well this works, because like you talked earlier about people are drawn to simplicity, especially kids with the Switch and stuff like that. And that's why they prefer, your son prefers the Backbone. That is what's going to make this a make or break thing. And I think it's going to do really, really well, simply because ROG Ally is already a trusted device that performs really well. And you're marketing with Xbox, with Game Pass, which I would imagine it comes with 90 days of Game Pass when you buy it. Mm-hmm. Like, this thing is going to blow the doors off the handheld community. It really, really is. And if they have the ability to put SteamOS on it too, because some consoles like Legion, Lenovo on their Legion Go series this year is putting Steam. They have a SteamOS version, but you're seeing more handhelds have the option to put SteamOS on there. And I don't have a lot of data to talk about how that's done or not, but if you can get SteamOS and go back and forth between that and Game Pass, this kills the Steam Deck. It really does. Because the Steam Deck has reigned supreme amongst all of these other handheld releases because of the simplicity of the UI and how well SteamOS just works. You turn it on, you get into your game, and you start playing. It's just held back by actual hardware and the power behind it. So this has the potential to be like, I want the black one, like the Ally X, not the white one. Because it's just that much more powerful, and it looks like spec wise like it's going to be amazing. Ergonomics, specs, 120 hertz refresh rate. It's a 7-inch screen. Would like to have seen a little bit larger of a screen, to be
24
honest.
24 gigabytes of RAM versus 16 too.
Yeah, 24 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte of SSD storage. It's upgradable with, I think it has M.2, so you can add on top of the internal storage and not replace it. I might be wrong on that. And it uses their brand newest chip, the Ryzen A1 Z2 Extreme, and I was impressed with the Z1 Extreme. So this is just going to be an absolute beast of a console. And for Game Pass, as you know, it's not about hardware.
Agreed.
It's about internet connection. So it's going to have all the docking capabilities, and it's chunky enough that like it's going to have good battery, good heat dissipation. Like this thing is going to be big, I think.
And it looks like it has that multi-platform compatibility, right? This buy once, play anywhere was one thing I really love about Xbox. Like, you can buy it on Xbox, you can play it as a PC game as well when you buy it in that format. And so I'm excited about this, man. Like, I was not thinking about. I already told you, like, my Ally kind of sits around. I was not thinking about upgrading any handhelds anytime soon prior to this, because I'm completely sold on the Xbox ecosystem, Xbox environment, like completely sold. And this changed my mind. Has pricing? I don't think pricing has come out around this, has it?
No, but it's going to be probably $800 to $900, I would imagine.
For me, like I was not thinking about buying anything anytime soon prior to this coming out, and I'm wondering, like, this is, I think, going to be the user interface. Like, I haven't watched a lot of videos on it. I haven't had a lot of time on it this week.
Yeah. So what they did is Xbox did a kind of hybrid mix with Ally's. They had, oh my God, what do they call it? Ally had their game launch platform, and it was okay. There's nothing to write home about. But Xbox, like it's better. Now, I just did see that you can't get SteamOS on this, so that's definitely a bummer. So it won't kill the Steam Deck in any way. But anyways, look how thick that thing is. Good Lord. That is a chunky boy. Dude, I don't know why there's not just a straight up Ethernet jack right inside of it. Like, it's got the room for it.
They got Thunderbolt 4. Can you Ethernet through Thunderbolt 4?
Yes, I believe. I don't know off the top of my head. Look at the bezel though. That's a wasted opportunity. So
Yeah, the
like,
space. Agreed. Like around this.
yeah, yeah, they didn't like that. You don't need to see ROG. Like, make that screen bigger, but it's all about aspect ratio.
Yeah.
They could have made the console a little bit longer or
This is
wider.
16
I
by
guess.
9. What is this?
Yeah,
So it could have
Yeah,
been 16 by 10 if they would have.
yeah, just like the Lenovo Legion Go 2 is 16 by 10. Oh, I'm sorry, no. Holy crap! What was the one that I reviewed that they sent out to me? It was the
7.
but it was the Claw. The Claw 7 has 16 by 9. The Claw 8 has 16 by 10. And that 16 by 10 is a big deal.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and they should have done that because that bezel looks terrible. It looks like older tech, and that's what I don't like about this. This looks like something that came out in the 2000s.
I mean, honestly, this is. I feel like this was a pivot. I don't know. Like, I feel like this was a pivot to Asus when the other version didn't work out. It's almost like they did some things simultaneously. And when the other option or the primary option internally or whatever the case may be, or maybe they were trying to go after Nintendo or who knows,
Yeah.
it didn't work out. And so then they pivoted to the next, viable option and ended up with Asus. And this was just like, okay, version 1, what can we launch by 2025?
So Asus, they hurt their brand's recognition with the launch of what came right after the original ROG Ally that we purchased. Was it what was it?
It was the Legion, right? Wasn't it the Legion
no.
Go?
But they didn't. No, I'm talking about their own lineup. Like
They had the lower version model that came out that didn't really sell.
Yeah, and I think they did. I'm trying to remember the timeline because I covered it in a video a couple of years ago. But basically, like, they released a news update. No, it wasn't a lower version one because they came out with that at launch. They were releasing,
but it didn't. Remember, it didn't release physically right away. The higher extreme version came out, and then there was like a 4 or 5 month delay before the lower tier was available.
Yes, but 6 months after the launch of the one that we got, they announced that there was going to be basically an upgraded version X of the one that we got, and it made a lot of people angry because the first 6 months of the Ally, it was really the one that kind of spearheaded the launch of handheld gaming. If you think about it, it had a lot of issues, firmware and software with overheating, SD
storage card,
and they announced an upgraded version while not fixing any of the original issues on the versions that we bought, and so they lost a lot of brand loyalty, and so this is an opportunity to repair that. So it's like Asus didn't do it because it was fun and exciting. They kind of had to.
Yeah, agree. I think, because we talked about this around that launch, I think the Rogue Ally was the launch of the gaming handhelds, even though Steam Deck, One X Player, all of those other ones were already out into the market. Yeah. But I think the Ally was the first time that what we would consider an everyday major, PC, peripheral / PC builder, laptop and all that stuff came out with a gaming handheld. Like, it was the first time that a reputable, and I say that with quotations because reputable depends on where all of that different stuff. But the first time that a reputable brand came out with something, even though there were other things already on the market, this actually was the one that launched the race between like MSI and Lenovo and all these other places that are now available. And I still think like One X Player just released something recently that was pretty cool as well.
I'm trying to get in touch with them.
But look, I got a list this long. But I think that this really did that, and I agree with you. They launched it, but because they were the major player at the time, like, people kind of were like, they're fixing it with firmware, or they're allowing replacements and stuff like that. But then when that Lenovo Legion Go came out, people were like, man, shit, switch light controllers and portability and all of that.
This year, this is where Asus had to do something different, because if they released just another version of their original console, it was not going to do well. Because if you look at the Switch 2, which is indirectly competes, but it's still a gaming handheld, and that's part of the market share, even though it's a completely separate ecosystem. But then you look at what I've got my eye on, like the Legion, not the Legions. I want to talk about that in a second. The MSI Claws that were coming out, the Claw 8, like that caught a lot of hype, and it's a really cool console. But the SteamOS Legion Go series, where you have Joy-Cons, you can use them as a mouse, a vertical mouse for shooting games that you don't have to use a joystick, so you can play console-based shooting games with a joystick like mouse type setup to make you even better. And it's the simplicity of SteamOS on a powerful device. Like Asus had to do something to try to, and so now we're about to go into the age of seeing really unique, and like every company is going to try to determine what is our niche of what our product does. Obviously Lenovo has the Joy-Con stuff. They have like the more peripheral based system, and now SteamOS, and now you see Asus partnering with Xbox, and I'm curious to see like where does the Claw series go, because that's just a big brick of a handheld, like what are they going to do different? I don't know.
That's it's interesting. It's super interesting. I really want to get my hands on the Ally Xbox Ally X to see what that user interface is. I thoroughly enjoy the Xbox ecosystem, the user interface. I thoroughly enjoy it. Even the refresh that they did recently, where they moved everything at the top. They moved the store, Game Pass, the games, all of that stuff at the top in a quick bar. So I really want to understand if this Rogue Xbox Ally X or X Ally, whatever the hell they're calling it, if that's going to have, this unique. I know they're doing like demos and different stuff like that, but demo is one thing. It's different when you get it in your hands and you actually have to navigate it, use it, and different things like that. I think, what was it? Armor Crate is the
Armor Crate. Well, and so so that's going to be the biggest distinction. Are you launching a platform on top of desktop? And a lot of people just don't like that. They want to turn on their system. They're met with a very simple UI, and that's why the Steam Deck works. The Steam Deck, you can use it as a desktop in a docking station, and it's not great at all. I've tested it. But you turn it on, you're immediately in SteamOS, which I don't know if you're going to be able to beat SteamOS just in terms of aesthetics and simplicity, but it's just perfect with the thumbnails of games. It's just like a streaming service is what it feels like.
And again, I hate to beat a dead horse, but talking about do you always need brand new, this is absolutely why I love the Logitech G Cloud. You can change the user interface. Right. You can change it between tablet mode, and you can change it between gaming interface mode, and like everything is just a tile. Yeah. Or you can switch it back to tablet mode. Now you got icons. And like it does it seamlessly. Like, and you don't, like, when it switches, it is a complete different experience. And if you buy these gaming handhelds for streaming, SteamOS and different stuff, like you can do all of that on the G Cloud. Like, and it's using the power of whatever you're streaming from. So the PlayStation, the Xbox, or whatever the case may be, it's using the power of that system to stream for. So it's just. And then the Game Pass is 1080p capped at 60 frames per second, so it's the same experience no matter what handheld you're on.
That's what will be interesting about this is can it do both the PC and the console gaming on one device if you put it into a docking station?
It says yes on the media. That's what
that is
the Play Anywhere thing. Yeah.
See, that's really nice because usually Game Pass is like you do the PC route or the console route, or you can pay for both. If you use a hybrid system, but like this justifies paying the extra price tag to get the console and PC experience.
If you buy this, are you getting Game Pass back?
I mean, I don't really have a library. I know. But it doesn't change that dollars are coming out of the account. But
dollars back in though.
Yeah, I don't have a library to justify purchasing it. I don't know, man. That's a good question. Because like I know how I game, and I know that I'll get caught up in the hype, but I don't know if it's going to be worth it in the long run. I will definitely buy it for a couple months to test it if I get the system and I want to bring it to the channel. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I need to see the functionality of it. It'll be interesting because I want to see how well it works with streaming games from Game Pass. Like if that's a seamless experience, because like for me, I don't like streaming games to Game Pass because of the resolution if I'm not on a handheld. So if it looks good and it performs well, the resolution on like 1080p on a screen size at 7 inches, it's going to look great. I don't care about that.
That's what got me back into Cyberpunk.
Yeah. Well, and see, also, I just don't like the ergonomics of looking down and while I'm playing. But here I am with the Switch doing that exact same thing. About Pikmin 4. Pikmin's one of my all-time favorites.
I've never played that.
Oh, dude, you would. we'll talk about that another time because I love Pikmin. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, I definitely would just to test it out and see. I don't know if I would keep it though, because again, I don't put enough time into gaming to justify it, you know. So, but there's some games I'd like to try that it would give me an excuse to go ahead and try those games to see if they're worth buying at least.
Yeah. So okay, we're getting close to wrapping this thing up. And so what I would say is if you're just tuning in and you're TikTok live or what have you, go take a look at the full episode on the YouTube channel because today we covered some pretty cool topics and I think they're worth discussion. So if you didn't see this whole thing, we really covered what I think we should go more in depth into about whether brand new is always something you should buy. And I do want to talk about this more in the future. And I want to come up with some more some detailed examples that we could use to share with people on how, like even me as a consumer, how I make my purchase decisions. I don't always go out and buy brand new. You know what I mean? Like I buy brand new when it's for my channel and stuff like that, and I have to share it and show it. But a lot of time, last year's tech that was brand new and everybody was going crazy about it is just as good this year. For the average person. And even sometimes tech 3 years ago, most of us outside of this tech world, this tech YouTube review channel world, don't really know the difference between an OLED from 2015 versus 2025. Picture looks good on all of them,
For me, I hate buying used tech with a passion. So I will wait until the newest version is so much better that it justifies paying the full price for it. So
I'm similar, but
I just hate knowing someone else's grubby hands were all over this piece of tech.
I'm not new. I mean, what I mean by old, I'm not saying
still buying it retail price.
I'm saying buying retail, the retail version of last year's tech versus buying this year's version, right? So
I thought you were meant get it off a marketplace.
Yeah, I don't trust people's maintenance of their products.
100%.
Right?
I'm so clean with my tech and I'm so careful with it. Yeah.
Agreed. I baby my stuff. That's one thing, I don't like buying used camera gear and different stuff like that because I don't trust you. I don't trust how you carried it, how you maintained it, temperature, different stuff like that. But what I'm saying is, do you need to buy the LG C5 or are you okay with a C3 if you can find one?
Yeah.
At BrandSmart versus the C5 at Best Buy. That type of thing is what I'm saying. And so I would like to talk about examples in the future of tech that makes sense to still buy older generations versus the brand new one that released in 2025.
It's all about how much feature proofing you're going to get out of it. If you know that you're going to get a lot of runway out of it, then that's worth it. But we'll definitely expand on that. But man, it's a good cast today. It's we missed last week, so we'll try to stay on top of this. But life just gets in the way sometimes.
It gets busy. It gets busy around here. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you in the next episode. Nice hanging out with you on TikTok live. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the comment section below. If you have any suggestions about stuff that we should cover or something you want us to go more in depth on, because we typically cover a lot of stuff in the live and in the podcast. If there's anything you want us to do a detailed episode on, let us know, because sometimes I do feel like some of the topics deserve a true 1 hour deep dive on some of this stuff just to really cover it from all angles. So let us know if any of that ever piques your interest.
The camera just shut off.
I don't know what happened there, but hey, that's that.
I retract what I said about Sony.
It's my setup. It's my setup.
Well, thank
See you
so
next
much,
episode.
everybody.
Stay cozy.
All right. That actually is a good cutoff.